Ready when you're ready. Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, of course, to Francesca Albanese for being here. It's a great honor to receive you here in the premises of the Dutch House of Representatives. And I also welcome colleagues from several political parties, the press, and those people who are following this meeting through the live stream. And that's the reason why I will ask colleagues, all of them, when you speak, when you're given the floor, to please speak in the microphone, so then the people who are following this online can also hear what you are saying. And Mrs. Albanese will have the floor for her introductory statement, and then we will open up the floor for questions and answers session with members of parliament who are sitting here around the table. We have time until 11 for that, and afterwards we have understood that you're available for questions by the press. Now that the logistics have been communicated, please allow me to introduce Francesca Albanese. She has been the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories since May 2022. She holds a law degree from the University of Pisa and a law degree in human rights from SOAS in London. And in the past, Mrs. Albanese worked for several offices in the United Nations, among them the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and UNRWA. Throughout her career, she has been a fierce advocate for Palestinian human rights and the upholding of international law. And naturally, we would have wanted to host this meeting in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. But resisting the severe cancel culture from right-wing conservatives, we are very happy to host Mrs. Albanese here in the offices of the Green Labour Alliance with friends from other political parties being present. You have been invited for several lectures in the Netherlands. I'm very sorry, but I have to drink a sip of tea. I understand. You have been invited for several lectures in the Netherlands, and as you have noticed, there's still broad support in this country for upholding international law, human rights and multilateralism. It is written in our constitution that we uphold the international rules-based order. And although it is under heavy attack, the politicians around this table are fighting every day to uphold especially those values. Today we would like to hear from you on the situation of Palestinian human rights in both Gaza and the West Bank. What the international community can do to bring an end to the suffering, I'm really sorry, and provide justice for the horrible war crimes that have been committed. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Francesca Albanese for some introductory remarks. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, distinguished members of parliament and the Honorable Kati Piri in particular. I'm visiting the Netherlands upon the invitation of several civil society organizations and academics. And in this context, I'm honored to address you and grateful for your openness to engage. Which doesn't apply to all parties, as the recent decision by the Foreign Affairs Committee to withdraw its invitation has shown. That meeting was a theater of the absurd. For the record, I'm not personally bothered by the refusal of some MPs not to meet me. Amused, and also the problem is, how can this decision be reconciled with Article 90 of the Dutch Constitution and its explicit commitment to the international legal order, which extends to the UN, its officials, and independent mechanisms? What I find deeply troubling in decisions like what the Dutch, not different from the Canadian Foreign Affairs Committee, have done is that efforts to delegitimize and ostracize me as a UN mandated independent expert are effectively directed against the millions of devastated civilians in Palestine who are subjected to unspeakable injustice and suffering. They are the ones abandoned, not me. And in fact, the actors attacking me aren't bothered with Israel's destruction of the Palestinians' fabric of life. Look at Geert Wilders' Freedom Party. In Palestine, this Freedom Party encourages Israel's colonial dictatorship and welcomes Trump's proposal for ethnic cleansing. But let's move to what brought me here, telling you about the occupied Palestinian territory and the inferno on earth that such land has become for most Palestinians. Last night I was privileged to deliver the first Dries van Agt lecture in warm commemoration of the late Prime Minister and founder of the Rights Forum. Dries van Agt named his last book on the matter, I'm not reading it in Dutch, Palestine in Mortal Agony. Anno 2025, tragically enough, this cri de coeur has proven prophetic. In Gaza, Israel's constant bombing, sniper and artillery fire has continued to spare no one. Journalists, students, scholars, doctors, nurses, persons with disability, humanitarian workers, mothers and children. Conservative figures indicate that the Israeli assault on Gaza has killed, injured and maimed or buried under the rubble at least 155,000 Palestinians. Entire families have been exterminated, pregnant women and over 700 babies. This was until we collected data, October 2024, for the babies who had been killed, among the 17,000 children who have been massacred. And just to add to this, as the Palestinians are led to breathe the wind of the ceasefire, 45% of the adult population in Gaza is taking care of children who are not theirs. And when we say children population, we are talking of including 18-year-old who have been left orphaned themselves and taking care of other children, orphaned. Gaza is now a wasteland of rubble, garbage, and human remains where survivors hold on to life amid widespread deprivation and disease. The Palestinians trapped there have experienced a level of violence not seen anywhere in this century. Prisoners sadistically tortured and raped, mangled, and desecrated bodies piled up and left decomposing in the street. Destruction of homes, months of relentless forced displacement across a territory rendered unlivable, with nowhere to flee, and little access to the most basic necessities, having absolutely nothing to return to. And all this has happened by design. The fragile reprieve of the ceasefire has meant that those who survived this 15-month assault were allowed to look around at the other survivors, to take a breath, to return to their homes and cities that no longer exist, to look for their loved ones, alive or dead, and to give dignified burials to them and the many others whose bodies were left to rot amidst the rubble. Meanwhile, the West Bank, including Jerusalem, has not escaped assault. Israel has in fact intensified and systematically intensified its assault since October 2023, conducting indiscriminate attacks, especially in the north, Jenin, Tulkarem, Nablus, Ubas, and neighboring villages. This tragically but predictably evoked the methods and typology of assault we witnessed in Gaza. The destruction of entire residential blocks, the depopulation and leveling of refugee camps, killing any Palestinians in the wrong place at the wrong time has become the norm. In the 12 months between October 2023 and October 2024, nearly 700 Palestinians had been killed in the West Bank, in occupied West Bank. Now that figure is 870. At any other moment, that would have raised alarm and international condemnation. Today, it barely registers with us, some of us.
This is the start of the plenary, but it will last a minute. If you want, you can continue. If you want, you wait for the bell.
No, I can continue. I just thought that someone had changed mind and wanted to.
No.
Today, it barely registers with us. Palestinians in the West Bank. Is it okay if I continue talking?
Yes, we're used to it.
Me too, somewhat. The background noise, it's okay. It very registers with us because Palestinians in the West Bank remain ignored. And now allow me to briefly present my legal perspective and argument capturing the urgency of the current situation. And in doing so, let me clarify for the record that it is my imperative to provide clarity regarding not only the facts that are presented, but the norms. Once I have made my analysis and come to the conclusions that violations of international law have been committed, my task is not to be equidistant between victims and perpetrators. My job is to insist on measures to restore legality, to undo justice, and to prevent further abuses and injustice. So impartiality does not require, it's something I take very, very, very seriously, doesn't require me to be equidistant between the parties, but to recognize and expose the asymmetry in power, resources, and agency between Israelis and Palestinians. That it is a relationship of occupied, occupier, and colonized, colonizer. What has been unfolding before our eyes would have not happened without the conditions deliberately created by Israel's sustained denial of Palestinians' right to self-determination during the past 75 years. Those who have not personally experienced the denial of self-determination do not comprehend how this denial impacts every facet of life, politically, economically, and culturally. However, without understanding the centrality of the right to self-determination to the question of Palestine, we cannot understand and effectively respond to the current situation, in particular, the total catastrophe that has unfolded in Gaza. If self-determination is the right of a people to exist as a people, genocide is the final stage of its sustained denial. I insist on describing the ongoing situation as genocide because it speaks to the long trajectory of the Israeli colonial project in Palestine, an increasingly real risk of erasure that the Palestinians face in the little that remains of their land. Genocide is a crime defined in a 1948 convention and is a very specific crime involving a set of acts: killing, infliction of severe physical or mental harm, the creation of conditions of life leading to physical calculated to bring about the physical destruction of a group, prevention of births, and forcible transfer of children. That is, and in order to have genocide, these acts, which are crimes in and of themselves, have to be committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a group as such. So it's not individuals here and there. The individuals do not count anymore. As long as you are part of the group, you are killable, you are destroyable, you are torturable, you are starvable. What we are all bearing witness is not only a genocide, is also what a settler colonial genocide looks like. The destruction is physical and biological devastation of the group in order to take control of the land. And this is the critical point here. Land is central to understanding the intent that drives Israel's genocide. While there has been broad recognition that Israel has committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in its all-out attack on Gaza, such framings reflect no more than what Palestinians have endured before the current escalation for decades. Failing to acknowledge that these acts constitute genocide leaves the totality of Israeli destructive conduct behind these acts, threading all these acts, camouflaged behind the distortion of international humanitarian law, human shields, evacuation orders, safe zones, collateral damage, and you name it. But what distinguishes genocide from other crime is, again, the intent, like the mindset behind the above described acts. It's the determination to destroy a group. The targeting of the Palestinian group as such, regardless of what they do or what they have done, is what has happened in the current assault. The key in proving this crime is therefore to identify the singular thread of intent that runs through the collective conduct. However, the problem is much deeper here than the failure to recognize genocide, because in the context of Gaza, Israel's genocide has been justified and even defended by third states that have evaded their responsibility under the Genocide Convention. And this is what I'm telling governments when they meet me, and this is what I'm telling you as parliamentarians, and I'm telling you as a fellow European, not just as a special rapporteur. It's happening also in our name, also with our resources. When the ICJ issued its provisional measures in January 2024, it put the world on high alert about the serious risk of genocide, triggering towards all states the duty to prevent, stop, and punish genocide. Member states have failed to comply with it and engage in prohibited conduct, including your country, such as transfer of weapons, parts, and dual-use items directly or indirectly through other states. And let me remind you that last year, the ICJ, in a landslide advisory opinion, has reaffirmed what Palestinian human rights NGOs and many UN special rapporteurs have long been saying. Israel's occupation is unlawful and should cease totally and unconditionally. The General Assembly set a deadline of 13 September 2025 for Israel to comply. The court ordered Israel to withdraw its troops, dismantle its settlements, and relinquish all controls on resources. For other states, this means no longer should their legal concerns be constrained to particular Israeli acts, such as the expansion of settlements or the widespread arrest and detention of Palestinians, including children. Israel's presence as a whole is unlawful. And this imposes on all states a positive duty to cooperate to bring an end to that illegal presence, and a negative duty not to recognize it as lawful and not to render any aid or assistance to it of any nature, material or immaterial, tangible or intangible, civilian or military. Anything of what Israel has built in what remains of the homeland of the Palestinians is to go. These are non-derogable obligations the member states, including the Netherlands, have under international law, and they must be upheld at all times, regardless of the circumstances, without any discretion. And in the midst of the current rhetoric of the United States, it is also important to emphasize that the ICJ has also affirmed that the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people is inalienable and cannot be negotiated with the occupying power, and should be realized independently from the diplomatic process. So first, they are allowed to live free as a people in the land that has been recognized by international consensus, and it has been a huge compromise for the Palestinians, as the territorial unity where the Palestinians have the exclusive rights to exercise self-determination in the form of statehood, and then they negotiate. For the Palestinians to actually exercise their fundamental right, they will of course depend on international support. In this regard, I commend the establishment of the Hague Group, with 9 countries, which 9 countries launched on January 30th, 31st, here in the Hague, setting forth the common commitments to uphold domestic legal mechanisms following the ICC arrest warrants, refusing harbor and imposing an arms embargo. I encourage all states, including the Netherlands, to join this initiative, these representing the most basic of states' obligations. Zooming out, yesterday's cancellation by the Foreign Affairs Committee reflects and reinforces a global context in which the stakeholders promoting international law, human and legal accountability in the context of Israel-Palestine are quickly losing ground. Needless to say, Trump's re-election has exponentially accelerated this trend. Nothing less than the continuity of the international legal order is at stake. It has taken so much human suffering and effort to develop an institutionalized international legal order. In the capital of international peace and justice, I appeal to your humanity and political will to defend this order and work together with others toward its enforcement. And with this, I would like to thank you and look forward to our interactive discussion in the remaining time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, I think, for a clear overview, both from a legal and from a moral point of view. I'll open up the floor for the colleagues who have some questions, just indicated, and I'll start with Mr. Paternotte, who's from the D66 Liberal Party.
Thank you very much, and thanks so much for joining us today. I was saddened that the Foreign Affairs Committee decided to cancel the invitation, and indeed, as you stated, that's evident of a sad state of affairs, of not being even feeling in a position to talk with people you might disagree with, which I think is something it's very important to also speak to people you don't agree with. Unfortunately, we only have parties here at the table which are very critical at the government for the way they are handling the situation in the Middle East. My question is about one of their policies, because last December the government struck a deal with two right-wing opposition parties to cut funding for the UN Works and Relief Agency. And the aim is to reduce the funding for UNRWA to almost zero in 3 steps, and sending that money to perhaps other aid organizations and humanitarian organizations. I was wondering if you could tell us something about what that means in daily life for Palestinians in the occupied territories, because I think many people in this country don't really understand what the impact might be. It would be good to hear a little bit about that.
Ms. Albanese.
Yeah, if you allow me to comment on the fact of disagreeing, I mean, I think that the people, I mean, the MPs who decided not to meet me did so because they cannot afford to be seen in disagreement with me. Because, excuse me, what are they going to disagree with me about? The facts? Give me other facts. What is wrong in what I said from an international law perspective? And this is what I would like the Dutch people to understand, over and above the noise of, you know, what has happened here is very dangerous, because it shows the kind of pressure that others, it's really sad that the capital of peace and justice is facilitating somewhat Israel's repressions on the one hand, but also even its parliamentarians who had invited me. So it's not that they didn't know what they were putting themselves into. Then disinvited me under pressure. And the same thing has happened in Canada. Let's wake up. UNRWA. UNRWA is, you know, I would like to use my other hat, because what I've done in my life, my professional and academic life, before being a special rapporteur, concerns UNRWA. I've worked with UNRWA, and as I left UNRWA, I decided to write a book with my Dutch brother, Lex Stackenberg, about Palestinian refugees in international law, and UNRWA is critical to that, and there is so much ignorance about UNRWA. So 2 things. First of all, UNRWA is just part of the international, of the UN system that was devised to protect and assist Palestinian refugees in the aftermath of the creation of the State of Israel, which came, which was a way, again, was a way for the Western states, what we call Western states, and European states, to unleash their sense of guilt and resolve their sense of guilt toward the Jewish people onto the Palestinians. This is the past, and still the consequences are still there. There are still 7 million refugees, including their descendants. However, there was another body, the UNCCP, which was supposed to facilitate either the return or the resettlement of the Palestinians, which couldn't advance its work because of the pressure primarily of the US, and of course the refusal of Israel and the indifference of all the others. The point is, 2 things. UNRWA was ancillary, was created as an ancillary body to this. And the international community decided not to support the UNCCP, the United Nations Conciliation Commission for Palestine anymore, and worked through the General Assembly to dismantle it. It's unfortunate, and still there was a process that respected multilateral order. I will come back to this later. And then the other thing is that UNRWA is what remains of the permanent responsibility that the General Assembly has vis-à-vis the Palestinian people for having proposed the partition plan, which triggered the refugee question. You see where I'm coming from? So UNRWA is not a UN agency like, I don't want to name any other agencies because everyone is at risk today, but it's a subsidiary body of the General Assembly. It cannot be just funded. If the Netherlands doesn't want to support UNRWA, it is to go through the General Assembly. This is how the international democratic order works. Otherwise, this is just using privilege to harm the international multilateral system. And how is this going to affect the Palestinians? Of course, it's going to affect the Palestinians. It's going to affect people in the region because UNRWA has been the main provider, first and foremost, of education. There are 500,000 children in UNRWA schools. And while after the beginning of the peace process, the resources for the Palestinians that used to be channeled through UNRWA have split, have gone partially to the Palestinian Authority and partially to UNRWA. And this is where also the quality of education started to decrease. Palestinians have been the driving force with their intellect and capacity to rebuild themselves from the ashes that have also led to the economic, the oil boom in the Gulf countries, because Palestinians have trained through UNRWA programs and educated in UNRWA schools, have really managed to achieve so much in life other than citizenship. So this is UNRWA. UNRWA has done a very poor job at protecting itself, at defending itself, because it has played the role of this humanitarian agency. UNRWA is so much more than a humanitarian agency. So the Palestinian, so there is the dimension of the violation of international law and UN law and a multilateral order. There is the cynicism of what is going to be done to the Palestinians, especially at this most tragic moment. Have you seen what Israel has done to Lebanon? It has applied the same script then it has used to destroy Gaza. And there are many Palestinian refugees there, still living there, despite the awful conditions that have been experiencing in Lebanon. So it's not that the Netherlands' decisions and others is going to affect only the Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory. It's going to affect Palestinian refugees everywhere. And why? This is intentional. Because someone thinks that by destroying UNRWA, the question of the historical rights of the Palestinians will disappear, will evaporate. No, this is delusional at best, because the rights of the Palestinian people are entrenched in international law. And to be very, very honest, UNRWA has been part of this humanitarianism that has treated the question of Palestine, in a way, as and this has been the attitude of some, as humanitarian question to deal in perpetuity instead of something to be resolved. And UNRWA has done so much good, but these are the interests behind. Here's where we are, at the end of the tunnel, and we need to decide what to do with the wall we have in front of us.
Thank you. Then Ms. Heers from the Green Labour Alliance.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your introduction and for your time with us. I share your concern about the falling apart of the international fabric and that we're witnessing it, and I see the way that certain parties in this parliament are vilifying your role as a UN rapporteur in that context. Now, we're here in the Netherlands, and I assume that many people are asking you, what should we do? And I will make that question a bit smaller, because I think the list can be endless. I would be interested in knowing what you would have said to our minister if you would have met him, if he would have met you. And I also am interested in knowing what you consider the biggest pressure point for the EU, and whether we should look also at our trade relations with Israel as a pressure point.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would have, had I had an opportunity to meet with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I would have told him what I've said to the Minister of Foreign Affairs through the various directors that I've met over the years, because it's not that this year there was something special. This is why yesterday, when I was asked, what would you have wished, that they didn't give that declaration to the press saying, I refuse to meet with, you have refused to meet with me even before. What's new? And in fact, it's not that I didn't have a meeting. I had the usual meeting that I have with the Minister of Foreign Affairs here, where there are really, again, very intelligent, knowledgeable people. The blockage is not in lack of knowledge, not in the lack of understanding of international law or the politics of the Middle East to an extent. Maybe the Orientalist lenses are still there, but the lens is still there, but still, this is not the problem. The problem is political will. So I would have told him I would have presented the facts, and I would have insisted on the legal obligations that the Netherlands as a country has. It's the fact that it doesn't matter if anyone in this country doesn't agree with my genocide reports or with Israeli scholars documenting genocide. I really encourage you to look at what Lee Mordechai in particular has put together as a database. And he's an historian, so he has documented also with an historical lens what has been done over the past 15 months in Gaza. But also Amnesty International, forensic architecture. Do people read in this country? That's not me, but let's not even go there. The ICJ in January last year has concluded in a matter of 3 weeks that there was a risk of genocide. There was a risk for the rights protected under the Genocide Convention of the Palestinians. There were critical responsibilities stemming from that. And if these responsibilities were vague or were not clear for someone, the ICJ itself, in another proceeding than the South Africa versus Israel that is now pending, Nicaragua versus Israel, has reminded member states of their obligation not to trade arms with Israel. And you know what is interesting in that judgment, and I mean in that decision, and I really encourage you to use it, is that the court doesn't only say because of the risk of violations of the Genocide Convention, but also of the obligations stemming from international humanitarian law. So it refers to other crimes that might be committed and that have been committed. And you know why? There is an ICC arrest warrant for the fact that there is an ICC arrest warrant for 2 Israeli leaders for war crimes and crimes against humanity further substantiate that the urgency of that call. So the Netherlands, the government of the Netherlands might be found responsible for not aiding and assisting if it's proven that it has transferred. I mean, now there is I won't comment on that because there is a court case ongoing for certain weapons transferred to Israel. But again, if this is correct, there are responsibilities and there might be personal responsibilities, you know. The other thing, and this is the second part of the questions, and it's even more important going to what you mentioned in terms of trade. It's that, I mean, even before this last 15 months, there were, countries like European countries were already in violation of certain critical prohibitions of international law. Because, now we know, because even the International Court of Justice has said that with unprecedented clarity, what many of us, UN experts, Israeli, Palestinian, human rights organizations, international organizations, the occupation is unlawful because it leads to apartheid, because it leads to the unavoidable, irredeemable crackdown on the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people. And because of it, the ICJ has concluded the occupation must be dismantled. It's not just the occupation, it's Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territory with the troops, with the military barracks, police police stations, everything that it implies use of force. But not only that, Also, the civilian presence. The settlements must be dismantled. It doesn't mean that all the Jewish people living in the occupied Palestinian territory have to go, will be ethnically cleansed. No, there are so many Israelis living in the occupied Palestinian territory. You know what's the difference? Is that A, they don't live in stolen land. B, they don't go hunting Palestinians trying to attack them or erase them. They pay rent instead of stealing. You know, it's a huge difference. And they live among the Palestinians. I mean, you wonder why you're not enjoying Tel Aviv? Because you can live safely among the Palestinians. And then the other thing is that it has said the third thing is to relinquish control over natural resources. So it's total. It is to be end of material, immaterial, tangible, intangible exercise of authority over the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And the General Assembly has given a deadline to Israel to comply with this. Now, it's not just to Israel. We, as third states, all of us have a responsibility not to aid and assist, not to recognize the legal consequences of this unlawful endeavor. And this triggers responsibilities for us as well, not just our states, but our private sector. The private sector, meaning companies, pension funds, banks, supply chains, but even, you know, universities having partnerships with other universities in the settlements. Although, and I move toward the last point, the problem here is not the settlements anymore. It's not just the settlements, because Israel commits crimes in the occupied Palestinian territory. At the time of South Africa, was anyone distinguishing between, oh, we are going to divest or sanction South Africa, but just for what it does in the Bantustan? I mean, the moment that you are an apartheid state, I mean, the ICJ has said Israel practices in the occupied Palestinian territory, racial discrimination and apartheid. What else? So how many more crimes do we need to list? So the trade part is critical. And it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling that the European Union still maintains trade relations with Israel. This is why I'm saying it's not that we have not taken action to stop it only. We have enabled it as Europeans, because trust me, I'm investigating right now, and I had no idea what I was putting my hands on. The private sector complicity, from the military, strategic, tech, industry, into the civilian part, including charities. You know, there are charities in Western countries who are selling property of the Palestinians in the West Bank to their fellow citizens. On how many dual nationals we have that are also settlers or have committed crimes. So this is the reality. That, I mean, the erasure of the Palestinians in Palestine is something that concerns all of us. And what I would have concluded in my address to the foreign minister is, again, this government must act, and not out of charity, but out of compliance with its legal obligations.
Thank you. Stefan van Baarle, from the leader of the DENK party.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Albanese, and also thank you for speaking out for international law, for speaking out against the genocide in Gaza, and thank you for the work that you do. There was an enormous smear campaign in the last days against you as a person, and not only in the last days, but for a longer time. And it's a pattern that we see in society and also in international relations, that people that speak out for international law and people that criticize the state of Israel are labeled as anti-Semitic, are labeled as supportive of bad things. And I would like to ask your reaction to the people that invoke the smear campaign, and also what would be your message to all those people in society that speak out for international law, that speak out for the position of Palestinians and also see that smear campaign, that cancel culture. What would be your message to all those people in society that speak out for international law and for the right of Palestinians?
Thank you. The attacks against me, it's something that I don't take personally, because when I was appointed a special rapporteur, I was painfully aware of what I would have faced, somewhat. And no, because I had completely underestimated the misogyny. There is also this part, you have no idea, but one day I will write a memoir about how much misogyny I've encountered, especially in our liberal democratic societies. Huh? The level of disrespect is incredible. However, I know, because the accusations of being anti-Semitic, which is horrible. I mean, for me as an Italian, I'm in pain when I think that I don't freak out anymore when they tell me this, because it's revolting. Anti-Semitism is real. It exists. There is still discrimination against the Jews as Jews in our part of the world. How it's possible? What have we done wrong? And at the same time, not only we neglect this, and we neglect also the discrimination against other people, Arab people, Muslim people in particular, and the Palestinians. I mean, the anti-Palestinian racism should be investigated. And again, this is, I hadn't thought of it, but this is really something I'm recommending everyone, and I really encourage you to look at, because it's totally underchecked in many places. And so at the same time, I know that these allegations are not against me as a persona. It's against me as for what I say, for the facts and the legal analysis I bring, and because it's very difficult to silence me. For a combination.
Try again.
No. For a combination of reasons. This is why they need to unleash these virulent campaigns. Let them do that. Look, eventually, I don't think that here, again, because the reality is so clear, as it was clear, it is even more clear than before. In other cases, you know, it's very clear. It's accessible. We cannot, any possible ignorance cannot be excused because of the kind of education and knowledge and access to information technology. It's not even, it's really the performance that is enacted that is pathetic. I mean, yesterday I was seeing on social media, and there were really people excited. Oh, we managed not to have a heard in the parliament. It's not even true. I mean, do people see us? And again, eventually I don't want to convince anyone. It's not my job. My job is just to analyze facts according to international law. That's it. And many more people want to listen. So the smear campaign is part of the attacks against anyone who dares criticizing the state of Israel. And this is the critical part. And now, anti-Semitism is no longer discrimination of the Jewish people as Jews. Now anti-Semitism is if you dare criticizing the state of Israel, but as our Jewish brothers and sisters tell us, Israel doesn't represent all the Jews. Like the state of the Vatican doesn't represent all the...
Yes.
Yeah. All the Catholic. So, you know, I will continue, because Israel, there's no reason to single out Israel. I agree. And there is no reason to treat Israel as Israeli historian Ras Sigal refers to as a state of exception. Israel must abide by international law like any other state. So there will be the genocide deniers. They will continue as they were 100 years ago. They're still among us. We still have that really deep-rooted racism toward the other that we need to deal with. And now it's more visible. So let's take these. This is a silver lining. This is such a revelation. It's very clear. And the camps are clear. There are the genocide deniers. There are so many who feel desperate. And they need you. They need politicians with a vision, not only to do the right thing, but to become more structured in a way we deal with what lingers in the middle. There is a movable middle. Who doesn't know what's going on? Because it's not very much like certain politicians. The media have amplified, have shockingly stuck with the Israeli narrative, the Israeli government, the Israeli military narrative over the past 15, 16 months, more than before. You know, blaming, smearing the Palestinians. So it's a moment of transition. I tell everyone, look, the worst we can do is to give in to pressure, like your colleagues. We can, not all of us need to be courageous, you know, it's about doing the right thing. We don't need to be on the barricades. There are wonderful activists out there who should be recognized. There are scholars, civil society organizations who take the courage and the risk of even suing governments, like here in Denmark, in the UK. This is the change. It's happening. We need to sustain that from all paths of life and from all corners of our societies. We can do that. Good.
Ms. Teunissen from Party of the Animals.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for coming to the Netherlands. Thank you for coming here to the Parliament. And I heard your lecture yesterday in the Dries van Acht lezing. I was very impressed, and thank you for speaking out so clearly for humanitarian international law. I think that's the most important thing we can do at this moment. Thank you also for speaking out for the rights for Palestinians. My question is about the ceasefire. We see that there's a lot of tension around it, especially now Trump has done these horrible pronunciations about emptying Gaza, horrible. So what do you expect from these ceasefire stages? And yesterday you talked shortly about involving the Palestinian community more in the negotiations. I was wondering, do you see any opportunities for the international community to put more pressure on the negotiations, also to involve the Palestinian people and the voice of the Palestinian people more? Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First of all, again, because Israel is an unlawful occupier who needs to, Israel's security concerns are fully appreciated, and I do not intend to downplay them, as I have never downplayed them before October 7, frankly. The point is that Israel confuses its security with the security of its annexation plan. This is, and will be a plan for disaster, because the Palestinians, I mean, you really need to exterminate them in order to achieve Israel's plan and whatever the U.S. president plans to do in helping the state of Israel. But again, I would like, first of all, people to stay calm, because it's normal. I mean, we are all shocked by the continuous waking up every day with something completely nonsensical coming from the United States. And at the time, and it's so nonsensical, but also profoundly unlawful, that gives you the sense of where the system is going. I don't think that the United States can afford to do that on their own. And this is why they are trying to co-opt others. And it's those others that needs to be brought back into the camp and secured and protected. Because the United States uses the vulnerability, the fragility of everyone in the international scene to, to pull the rope or to pull the chain. And this is the same thing that happens at the country level. We are all vulnerable. I mean, we can lose our jobs, we can lose our positions, our scholarships, and yeah, this is the risk. But let's try to think selflessly, if we can, both as individuals and as nations. Isn't it an opportunity? I know it sounds totally idealistic, but what's wrong with being idealistic? If idealism is premised, in this case, upon simple respect for international rules. It's not about utopia. It's something that we have already there, written in international treaties, and some of it is customary law. So I'm saying that generally, I think that we need to be very quick and fast at having a discussion at the national level as well as at the international level. I would expect the Netherlands, like any other countries, to engage with partners on an equal ground, because this is what we can afford right now after what we have endured, let happen, and even enabled to an extent as Western countries in Palestine. We have to be a bit more humble, and it's very good. It's a very good starting point. We don't sit at the table to teach or to lecture, but to listen and think together and strategize together. And the ceasefire has been fragile from the very beginning, because this is where I think that, again, we have a problem with most media in this part of the world. Because, you know, it's not that technically the ceasefire leads to ceasing fire. And this is not what has happened in Gaza, because there are more than 300 people who have been killed in Gaza alone by Israeli fire since the beginning of the ceasefire. 300. And the humanitarian aid has not entered as it should have. There have been delays. Just to clarify, the people who have been killed have been killed. They're clearly mostly civilians trying to re-enter the north. And there were attacks, including on children. I mean, it's shocking what we gather from Gaza. So the situation is very bad. The mobile homes have not entered. The tents have entered in smaller numbers. So there were already risks. But of course, if the discourse is, oh, Hamas is not releasing the hostages, Hamas must release the hostages. Israel must release the hostages. And the point is that Israel cannot decide anything regarding the future of the Palestinian people in line with international law and respecting the rights of self-determination of the Palestinian people. Seriously. Has anyone thought to talk to the Palestinians, not just the Palestinian Authority, which the Palestinians have to be given an opportunity to reorganize themselves, as other countries reemerging from conflicts have done and are doing. So it's no exception, but what the Palestinians, like other people in the region, are demonstrating, they need to be free from occupation, apartheid, and clearly genocide.
Shakur, Green Left Alliance.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. You talked about the human rights, children's rights, international rights, go on. And you also said children. It talks about pregnant women who got killed. And you also said the story that really touched me about 45 of Palestinians are taking care of orphaned children at this moment. And the whole world is looking the other side. But what can we do together to wake up the world?
The children. It's interesting, because when, thinking of it through the child's perspective, probably it's not a coincidence that after writing my first report on self-determination, because I really wanted to explain member states that they cannot, something that the ICJ has also recognized, by expecting Palestinians to be part of the peace process and negotiate, they're expecting Palestinians to negotiate the illegal, because Palestinian self-determination has been eaten up over the years of the peace process more than it was 30 years ago. And so after writing that report, I looked at detention, because I said, how come that almost 1 million Palestinians have been arrested and detained, including children, like 600, 700 children per year, on top of those who have been killed, etc. And this was only to realize, so again, I've learned so much about I was not an expert on the occupied Palestinian territory before becoming a special rapporteur. I was an expert on forced displacement of Palestinians. But I realized that there is a matrix, what I called arbitrary detention governance, mass incarceration governments. I mean, if you look at what the Palestinians are arrested and detained for, it's simple exercise of fundamental freedoms, which doesn't mean that the Palestinians have not committed or do not commit crimes against the Israelis. But during the period I was a special rapporteur, I reported 460 Palestinians killed primarily by the army and some settlers, and 650 Israelis killed. And why am I saying that? Because then after this, and saying, look, it's a carcerality from border to border, because it's the entire Palestinian territory, which is not just as a prison, open-air prison, it's a panopticon. It has the aesthetics of a prison, the gates, the restricted area, the restricted roads. And imagine for a child, I'm saying that to bring your mind there. In the West Bank, 400 kilometers of segregated roads, you know what it means for a child to have to go to school. Sometimes it would take 10 minutes and then they have to walk for 1 hour and a half. This is life for the Palestinians under Israeli occupation. And so, and then I said, again, they are the most surveilled population, the most threatened population in the world, and no, the most surveilled population in the world, and they feel extremely threatened. So I said, okay, let's look at children. And this is the thing, I concluded that already, the Palestinian children, I mean, the experience of life for Palestinians as a whole, Palestinian children, is unchilding. There is nothing of the lightness of childhood that is left to the Palestinians. Because any Palestinians would have lost a friend or a member of the community or a sibling or a parent. There is no one who has been spared, either by killing or arrest and detention. And the fear of being constantly attacked, to have the home demolished, the school demolished, this was life of the Palestinians before October 7. And then this led me to conclude, and this was prophetic somewhat. I didn't realize that I already knew what could happen. I said, attacking, because this is the jurisprudence of the ICJ, attacking children can be seen as a way to destroy a people. And this is something that even your country has subscribed in its submission to the case of Myanmar, Gambia versus Myanmar, you know. So what has happened today is a continuation on that. I remember I had a discussion with an Israeli soldier who was asked, why do you do this to children? And he said, we children. We don't see them. We don't see children. And now, I mean, when I say, yeah, we need to prove the intent, there is direct intent. When they say Amalek, we that this themselves, Amalek is a biblical term to say, take revenge against the enemy that has destroyed you, and attack, destroy the mother, the suckling, the donkey, the camel, you know, livelihood. So there is no possibility that Israel will stop. It has started, and it's not just the army. I really encourage you and others to listen, not to me. They need to listen to the Israelis. And this is the thing, that while people, to go back to your point also, while people attack me for violence, I mean, I'm look, it's been a heavy year, painful and frustrating. So surely I could have been more diplomatic from time to time. It's true. It's true. I wish I had the patience, but you know, when you see so many children dying all the time, and people do not listen, And people do not care. The feeling I have inside is, what kind of monsters have we become, or what kind of monsters we still are? And yeah, and sometimes, yeah, I could have chosen other words, fine. It does still doesn't make any reason not to meet with me. And the point is, meanwhile, Israeli representatives openly preaching genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are welcome in parliaments across Europe, in the United States, cheering crowds. It's the cheering crowds. It's not about comparing leaders of here and before. It's the cheering crowd of now and before that is shocking. And these are the political priorities these days among certain parties, and this is what we need to know. People who do not care for the rights of children have something deeply wrong, not only for foreign policies of this country, but for your very own society. Sorry, it was long, but I wanted really people to understand, because this is an opportunity to plant some seeds.
Well, I think you did that. Thank you very much. Thank you for having a passionate, also international law perspective. I'm happy you will not go into a career of diplomacy, but I think what you are very much respected for is that you speak with your heart, is that you come with the facts, and that is also why you are received in the way that you are being received in many of the universities in the Netherlands, for speaking out loud, speaking clear, and speaking with your heart. And I think that is very much appreciated also by us. Thank you very much. We wish you, you have an incredibly important job to continue reporting on the facts, what is happening with human rights on the occupied Palestinian territories. And I'm very happy and thankful for the colleagues and those people who followed us online. And before handing you over into the hands of the press, Ms. Albanese, would it be okay if we take a group picture with the members of parliament?
With pleasure, but Kati, can I call you Kati? Just one thing, because I don't think I'm not diplomatic. And again, I want to put it on record. I am very diplomatic when I talk to countries with the utmost respect and respecting protocols. I searched for opportunities to engage bilaterally, but hey, I mean, here, if you don't rock the boat, probably hadn't we rocked the boat this way, probably many more people would have been killed, who knows. So it's about international law, and they cannot be silent precisely because of our past. Our European past imposes us to be different today. Thank you.
And in this respect, just to make clear, it was meant as a compliment.
Thank you so much, and I would love to take a picture with you.
Let's take a